Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Willow had once believed with all her heart that her life was finally stepping into a new, radiant chapter as she prepared to become Drew's wife. For weeks, she had poured herself into every detail of the wedding, with a soft smile gracing her face as she carefully chose flower arrangements, hand-picked the color scheme for the reception hall, and wrote each invitation card with heartfelt sincerity. There was an unmistakable glow in her every movement, a glow born from the certainty that she was marrying a kind, trustworthy man, someone who had stood by her during the darkest storms, someone she believed would never let her fall again. More than that, Willow had dared to believe she had found something she'd long yearned for, a family she could finally belong to. In Drew, she saw not just a partner but the promise of stability, safety, and unconditional love. But that belief, that shimmering illusion of a perfect future, shattered with cruel precision in the final hours before she was to say her vows. It was Portia who stepped forward, not out of malice or jealousy, but out of sheer moral clarity and a desperate need to save Willow from walking blindly into a prison disguised as a fairy tale. Portia had been harboring doubts about Drew for some time, doubts born from quiet observations and unspoken inconsistencies. Yet she had remained silent, unwilling to ignite chaos without proof. But the weight of what she had uncovered became too much to bear. And so, in a final act of integrity, she approached Willow and told her the truth. The confession landed like a hammer blow to Willow's chest. Drew had not only manipulated Portia into falsifying Michael's medical records, crafting a fabricated narrative that painted Michael as a drug addict, he had done so with chilling ease and strategic cruelty. The man Willow thought she knew, the man who smiled so easily and spoke so sweetly, was capable of calculated deceit designed to dismantle lives for personal gain. Willow felt the breath ripped from her lungs. Her world swayed beneath her as her heart broke in ways she couldn't yet understand. But that wasn't the end of it. Portia, determined to lay every stone of truth bare, revealed what no daughter should ever have to hear. Drew had been having a secret affair with Nina, Willow's estranged and already controversial biological mother, all while professing unwavering love to Willow. The betrayal was no longer just romantic, it was spiritual, maternal, existential. The man Willow was about to marry had not only stolen her trust but desecrated the already fragile relationship between mother and daughter, injecting shame and confusion into a wound that had barely begun to heal. Willow could hardly process the horror. Her mind raced in dizzying circles. Every tender word Drew had ever spoken now felt like venom. Every promise he had made echoed like a lie. And when she thought of Nina, of the woman who had tried, clumsily, to reinsert herself into her life, she no longer saw a desperate mother seeking redemption. She saw a co-conspirator cloaked in selfishness, someone willing to sacrifice their daughter's dignity for their own gratification. The white wedding gown, once the embodiment of a hopeful future, now felt like a costume in a farce. Its elegance mocked her. Its symbolism burned. And in that moment, with her heart torn and her illusions in ashes, Willow made a decision that shocked everyone waiting patiently in the church pews. She would not become Mrs. Drew Kane. She would not pledge her life to a man whose hands were stained with betrayal. As Scout prepared to walk down the aisle and the music swelled, Willow remained in her bridal room, stripped of joy and drowning in disbelief. Then, without telling anyone, she slipped out. She left the dressing room, the ceremony, and the future that had been planned down to the hour. She abandoned the man who had lied so expertly. She walked away, not because she didn't love, but because love could no longer survive under the weight of deceit. Back in the church, Drew stood beneath the archway, smiling as Scout took her steps. But the bride never followed. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd as moments passed. Confusion turned to discomfort, then to panic. Somewhere far away from that altar, Willow was walking alone, her veil removed, her shoes in hand, her heart heavy with the realization that the life she thought she had built had been nothing more than a cruel illusion crafted by those she had trusted most. That day, she didn't just cancel a wedding. She ended an era of innocence, confronted the dark truths that others wanted buried, and saved herself from a lifetime of silent suffering. Portia had given her the gift of clarity, a painful but necessary light that revealed the rot beneath the surface. And though that truth cost Willow her sense of peace, it granted her something far more valuable, freedom. But the price of truth is never cheap. Portia, who had found the courage to confront the storm and rescue Willow from the brink of a disastrous union, quickly found herself thrust into the eye of another. In the wake of Willow's wedding collapse, Drew, once polished and charming, revealed a far darker side. Stripped of the facade he had carefully curated, he now viewed Portia not as a colleague or a doctor with integrity, but as a threat that needed to be extinguished. She had exposed the rot at the foundation of his image, and for that, Drew launched a relentless campaign of retribution. He began with whispers, small, poisonous rumors placed in the right ears. Using the vast media influence of Aurora Media, he manipulated narratives and planted stories in subtle, targeted ways. Headlines questioning Portia's ethics began to appear on fringe medical forums, then on reputable news sites. Anonymous sources hinted that she had altered patient records in the past, that she had used her role as a doctor for personal vendettas, and that she lacked professional boundaries. The avalanche of manufactured scandal gained momentum quickly, and soon, whispers turned into institutional scrutiny. Hospital administrators, already jittery from the public fallout of the cancelled wedding, summoned Portia for formal reviews, their faces tense with corporate anxiety. Despite having acted with moral clarity, Portia was asked to take a leave of absence pending a full investigation. The weight of humiliation crushed down on her shoulders, not because she had done something wrong, but because Drew had mastered the art of narrative control. He knew how to weaponize perception. The man who once spoke of love and redemption now revealed himself as someone who would burn reputations to preserve his own. And he wasn't finished. Drew, cunning and calculating, sought out Isaiah. He knew that Isaiah was one of the few people left in Portia's corner, loyal, principled, and emotionally tethered to her. Drew approached him not with brute aggression, but with sinister manipulation, dangling half-truths and veiled threats. He insinuated that Portia had been dishonest even with Isaiah, that there were things she was hiding, that her actions might eventually drag Isaiah down as well. He didn't stop at planting seeds of doubt. He threatened to release sensitive, deeply personal information about Isaiah's family if he didn't quietly distance himself from Portia. As Drew moved his chess pieces across the board, Portia found herself increasingly isolated. Her colleagues no longer looked at her with respect, they looked at her with suspicion. Nurses whispered when she entered the room, administrators postponed meetings, and patients requested transfers. The environment she had once thrived in had turned hostile, and every corridor in General Hospital now echoed with silent accusations. The betrayal ran deeper than professional sabotage. Drew was erasing her from the world she had fought so hard to build. Every connection she had nurtured, every ounce of trust she had earned, was slowly unraveling as Drew tightened his grip around the narrative. But just when it seemed Portia's destruction was all but inevitable, an unexpected ally stepped forward, Michael. The very man Drew had once tried to destroy with a forged medical addiction narrative now emerged as Portia's silent protector. Michael, having witnessed firsthand the level of ruthlessness Drew was capable of, refused to remain a passive observer. He began his own quiet investigation, pulling records, contacting journalists, speaking with colleagues, and identifying the planted stories in the media campaign. His access to the Quartermain name and influence gave him entry to places even Drew couldn't control. Michael compiled a dossier, not just of Portia's innocence, but of Drew's coordinated efforts to destroy her. The lies, the manipulation, the targeted leaks to the press, every tactic Drew had employed was documented in full. And Michael didn't keep it to himself. He took it straight to the hospital board, threatening to go public if they didn't immediately reinstate Portia and clear her name. His intervention turned the tide. The board, faced with the reality of a scandal larger than they had anticipated, moved swiftly. Portia's suspension was lifted, and Drew was summoned to answer for his actions. Though Drew maintained his defiant stance, the narrative was no longer his to control. For once, the truth spoke louder than his distortions. Portia, though battered, stood once again in the hospital halls, not as a victim, but as a survivor. And behind her, unwavering and fierce, stood Michael. In a world where so many had chosen to look away, he had chosen to fight. He had no obligation to Portia. Their relationship had never been particularly deep. But Michael understood justice. He understood the scars that Drew had left, and he refused to let another good person fall prey to the same cruelty. In many ways, Michael became the unsung hero of the entire ordeal. Not because he wielded power, but because he used it selflessly. Not because he had something to gain, but because he saw a moral line that had been crossed and stepped forward when no one else would. Thanks to him, Portia was able to reclaim her dignity, her position, and her voice. She emerged not just cleared of wrongdoing, but stronger, her integrity proven not only through her choices, but through the people who believed in her enough to defend her when it mattered most. Willow, despite narrowly escaping a catastrophic marriage, could not shake the overwhelming guilt that clung to her like a second skin. While the world might have viewed her as the lucky one, spared from the disaster that would have been a union with Drew, she could not celebrate her liberation. Every step she took away from that abandoned altar, every breath of freedom she inhaled, was tainted by the knowledge that someone else had paid the price for her awakening. That someone was Portia. A woman who, out of pure principle and moral conviction, had stepped forward when no one else dared, had sacrificed her own standing, her peace, and ultimately her career to shield Willow from a lifetime of lies. Willow tried to make amends, desperately. She reached out through every possible channel. She called Portia's phone, left long, emotional voicemails that often ended in tears. She sent flowers, handwritten notes, and even contacted mutual acquaintances to try and arrange a face-to-face meeting. When that didn't work, she went public. Willow issued statements to the press, praising Portia's bravery, acknowledging that the decision to cancel the wedding had only been possible because someone had spoken the truth when it mattered most. She volunteered to appear in interviews, to go on camera and defend Portia's integrity, even if it meant confronting Drew's wrath. But Portia, dignified even in her lowest hour, declined every offer. Not out of bitterness or resentment, but because she had already made peace with the path she had chosen. For her, truth was not a weapon to wield or a favor to be repaid, it was a moral compass. When she stepped forward, she had known the consequences. She had known the machine Drew controlled, the reach of his media empire, and the cost of standing against it. Yet she did it anyway. Because allowing Willow to walk blindly into a marriage rooted in manipulation and betrayal would have been the greater sin. Portia didn't want gratitude. She didn't need applause. What she needed was the quiet clarity of knowing she had done the right thing, even if it cost her everything. Meanwhile, Willow found herself navigating unfamiliar terrain. Her life without Drew, without the illusion of safety and love she once clung to so fiercely. She returned home to Scout, whose bright eyes and innocent questions grounded her in the here and now. But even the simple rituals of motherhood, packing lunches, brushing hair, reading bedtime stories, were no longer carefree. Each action carried a weight. Each laugh was tinged with a faint trace of sorrow. The vows she had once dreamed of speaking now haunted her like distant echoes. In moments of silence, she would catch herself whispering fragments of promises she never got to make, not out of longing, but out of disbelief. How close she had come to binding herself to a man capable of such darkness. Trust, once natural and instinctive, was now something she had to relearn. Her heart was no longer open, it was a fortress. And every new connection, every potential relationship, was met with scrutiny, caution, and emotional distance. The rupture between her and Nina deepened into an unbridgeable chasm. Their relationship had always been strained, defined by years of absence, mistrust, and too many second chances that never led anywhere safe. But what had happened with Drew destroyed any remnants of possibility. Nina had known about the affair. She had known the man her daughter was about to marry had not only manipulated others but had betrayed Willow in the most personal way imaginable. And yet, Nina had chosen silence. Out of fear. Out of selfishness. Out of a need to preserve her fragile place in Willow's life. To Willow, that silence was louder than any lie. It screamed cowardice. It screamed betrayal. A mother's role was to protect, to warn, to intervene when danger loomed. Nina had done none of that. She had chosen self-preservation over her daughter's emotional safety. And in doing so, she had forfeited whatever sliver of forgiveness still lingered between them. Willow no longer saw a mother in Nina's eyes, she saw a stranger, a participant in her pain, someone who had stood on the sidelines as her life unraveled. As for Drew, the man who had once promised her the world, he continued to weave a web of manipulation behind the scenes. Publicly, he maintained his carefully crafted persona, charismatic, polished, empathetic. He gave interviews that painted him as a victim of circumstance, used his media connections to spin narratives, and ensured that sympathy remained on his side. But in private, he tightened his grip on allies like Martin, coerced others into silent loyalty, and drew Tracy into morally murky ventures under the guise of business. Yet something had shifted. For all his power, Drew had begun to feel the hollow ache of loss. Not loss of status or influence, those could be rebuilt. No, what he had lost was irreplaceable. Willow had been the one person who had seen beyond his curated image, who had offered him love without condition, who had believed in him not for what he projected, but for who she thought he truly was. And he had destroyed that with his own hands. In his pursuit of control, he had crossed a line from which there was no return. The emptiness left behind was not just loneliness, it was self-destruction wearing the mask of victory. The story of Willow and Drew's wedding, that now infamous ceremony that never was, became more than a headline. It became a cultural cautionary tale. A sobering reminder that beneath the glittering surface of love can hide rot, that trust must be earned with truth, not performance. For many, it was a salacious scandal. For Willow, it was a rebirth forged in fire. No longer the naive girl who believed in fairy tales, Willow emerged from the ashes as a woman forged in the heat of deception and deliverance. She had learned the painful truth that deceit often wears the face of comfort, and that real love demands courage, not only from others but from within. Her future would be different now, not because she was broken, but because she had finally seen what was worth fighting for. And always, in the quiet corners of her mind, she carried Portia with her. Not as a friend she lunched with or confided in, but as a guardian of her soul. A woman who had stood tall in the storm and said the words no one else would. Willow owed her more than words could express. She owed her the life she was living, the life she almost surrendered to a lie. Perhaps they would never grow close. Perhaps they would remain two distant figures connected by a single, pivotal moment. But whenever Willow thought of Portia, she felt something deeper than gratitude. She felt reverence. Because in a world that so often punishes those who tell the truth, Portia had stood her ground. She had shattered the dream that would have destroyed Willow, and in doing so, gave her the chance to build a life rooted in something far stronger than illusion, clarity, resilience, and truth. In the end, what began as a story of love and celebration unraveled into a sobering portrait of betrayal, sacrifice, and transformation. The cancelled wedding between Willow and Drew became more than just a public spectacle, it became the crucible through which truths were forged, illusions destroyed, and characters revealed in their most unfiltered forms. For Willow, it was a painful awakening, one that stripped away her romantic notions of safety and permanence but gifted her something far more enduring, wisdom. She had learned, not through books or gentle counsel, but through the fire of lived experience, that appearances deceive, that silence wounds, and that even those we love most can fail us in the darkest moments. Portia, the unsung heroine of the entire ordeal, emerged not with applause or vindication, but with her honor intact. She chose principle over popularity, truth over protection, and integrity over ease. Though she paid a steep price. Her career momentarily destroyed, her reputation dragged through the mud, she stood as living proof that courage often walks a lonely path, but never an empty one. And while the world may never fully understand the depth of what she gave up for Willow, Willow herself would never forget it. Michael, too, rose from the background, refusing to let Portia become another casualty of Drew's manipulations. He acted not out of obligation, but out of conscience, becoming the anchor that helped right a moral ship that had nearly capsized. His actions served as a reminder that heroes are not always the ones who speak loudest, but often those who act with quiet conviction when it matters most. Nina, meanwhile, faded into a painful footnote in Willow's story. Her silence and cowardice cost her not only her daughter's trust, but also the chance to ever be part of her life in a meaningful way. Her decisions were a testament to how fear, when left unchecked, can become as harmful as action. In trying to hold on to her daughter, she had lost her entirely. And Drew, the architect of so much heartache, was left to confront a legacy built on lies. He had everything: power, influence, love, and he squandered it all in the pursuit of control.